we go. Is this one? Yeah, this one should be short. So problem where the damper door is just closing and opening constantly. And Vance came in immediately, pointed him in the right direction. You got to check for feedback because you do have a feedback line on this one for the damper, and we'll look at the schematic to see exactly how that works. So they're
which
calling
we
it,
often call sensing line. We typically
yep,
would call them sensing lines, feedback lines, signal lines. You'll see them called differently. All synonyms for the same thing.
just like they're using air baffle as a synonym for damper. Again, refers to the same kind of component. So
Minotaur as a synonym for dinosaur.
you got your control board right over here. I just took a clip of the schematic because it's a very sprawling one. Couldn't fit it all on here, but you get the idea. They don't give any specs right here, but they do fortunately have a spec block over here. Always nice when they do that. And what we've got here is at P2 pin 2. That's where you've got, you see, they're calling it feedback data line, same thing for the air door. And then over here on P2.5, that's where you have output to the air door. So that's your actual power supply. And so the important stuff you get here, 120 VAC load, that damper, okay, normal 120 VAC load, and that your sensing line there is just for 120 volts.
Right. So
It,
they're using that one. This is a case where 120 is being used as a signal and not to power a load. So in a sense, you can call it data, though usually I reserve the word data for the DC pulses, but this is acting as a signal.
yep, it's just going to be the presence or absence of that 120 that the board is detecting as that signal. And so if you go over here, you've got P2 right over here. So let's see, we've got our pins of interest are 2 for the signal and 5. Again, they don't call them out here or on the baffle, but you can just trace them in and figure out which is which. So 5 goes over here. I had to clip it off because it goes on a big sprawling journey, but it comes back up here. See, it's that same yellow-black wire. And then you've got your signal over here. Comes along there and comes up to pin 2.
Right. So that
So to
signal line inside that air baffle, there's a switch, and that's switching 120 on the orange yellow line back to the board. And that's the classic configuration of a sensing line, signal line, feedback line is a switched line that goes back to the board. And it's like, well, what's it doing? Well, it's giving a signal.
Yep. So that's all that's going on here. And so clearly the board is not receiving that signal. So that's what Vance was telling that guy to go check is, go into diagnostic mode, run the damper, um, do a test right here and see if whether you have 120 or 0 volts there changes. See if that changes with the position of the damper. If it's not changing, then the board's not getting its signal and it has no way of knowing where the damper is, and it's just going to keep running it, trying to open and close it until it gets some feedback of
Yeah.
what position the damper's in.
So you have one probe of your voltmeter at P22 and the other one at P12. That's your neutral.
Oh yeah, P22 and
And so you're just looking
P12.
for a change in that voltage from 0 to 120, 120 to 0.
Yep, simple as that. So just another example of a sensing line here for that component. Super simple, but you've got to know that for situations like that where the board is obviously seeking. That's a common seeking behavior where it's doing that opening and closing. The
So
board
which
is,
means that the air buffer, the damper gets power, so it's opening and closing, which means it's getting power, but it's not switching to the point where it feels its voltage to the 5, the pin 5.
yeah, so presumably you've got some because he described it, the motor was actually moving. The door is opening and closing.
Yeah,
So you've probably got some failure of that switch in there, and the position switch is just not changing state.
right.
So the board is not getting the feedback it's looking for to tell, okay, yes, the damper has closed or the damper has opened,
Right. So the board keeps supplying 120 to the motor on the yellow black line.
in the hopes that we'll eventually get a signal telling it that the damper has changed state.
Mhm.
Right.
No, I
Could
don't have
be
it in
a
front of me, but
wiring. You could have a wire failure too, or a connector failure too, right? On that
Mm.
line.
Yeah,
Yes.
yep. That's the other possibility is that you've got a break in this wire somewhere.
I'm not
That's
looking at the post, but from memory, didn't he say that in diagnostic mode cycling the damper, that the display would change from closed to open, but not from open to close or something as it continued cycling?
Yeah, there was something like that. Video voltage seems normal, but like it doesn't know that it's shut. Yeah, he says that here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but he doesn't explicitly say it did know that it was open. He just
Yeah,
says
no,
it didn't know that it was shut. Okay,
yeah,
got it.
yeah, which makes sense. That's
Yeah.
consistent with what we're hypothesizing here. So yeah, that would be this guy's next step is do this test that we've drawn in here, see if he's seeing anything. Obviously, if you are getting the voltage signal there and the board is not responding appropriately, that can really only leave the board itself. Because that means the board's getting the signal, but it's not interpreting it appropriately, and would be a problem internal to the board.
And I know you guys probably said this and I probably missed it. What what would be the frequency if we're doing the test with our meter there? What would be the frequency or like how many seconds in between we would see that the voltage reading on that?
If it's in
It
spec,
takes about 10 seconds.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
this. Wah, wah,
So every time
wah.
it reaches the end of it completes the state change of the damper.
yeah, that's if it's working in spec, then in one position, fully open, you should have either 120 or 0. They don't say which one. And then
Okay.
in the other state, you should have the opposite.
Yeah, if you're watching the damper move, I mean, it's just a little stepper motor,
Yeah.
or synchro motor, I think, and so they move slow. So, but if you're watching the damper open and close, that is the frequency. You can visually tell it.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, that's what we got for today.